When Andy Dufresne, in the film The Shawshank Redemption, escaped from his prison cell, the escape appeared at first even more remarkable because the cell door had remained locked. Standing in the empty cell, the exasperated prison warden sarcastically refers to the escape as a miracle and, more or less the same thing, as a fart in the wind. Now, if the cell door had been found open, the escape would not have been nearly so impressive. It would suggest the simple solution that someone else had opened the door. Simply put, the escape from an enclosed space, which remains closed, is far more impressive than escape from a place that is no longer secure. So let's consider the supposed empty tomb of Jesus. The Gospel narratives make clear that Jesus, risen in his new spiritual but physical body, can appear and disappear at will and move through locked doors. It really would be absurd for someone with this kind of miraculous power to be able to escape the clutches of death and yet be unable to escape the restraints of a stone door, no matter how large. And we are talking of Jesus, remember, the God, Son of God, creator of the universe. Therefore, it was not for the benefit of Jesus that Mark and the other evangelists wrote of the rolled stone. Jesus surely could have left the tomb anyway. So for whose benefit was the rolled stone introduced into the story? The answer, of course, had nothing to do with reporting real-world events. The evangelists required an empty tomb, a hole in the ground no less, as the essential witness for the supposed resurrection of Jesus. Suppose the tomb had remained closed. The women could still have encountered the young man, but outside the tomb. He could still have said, "He is risen," but the tomb was opened as a way of providing visible confirmation of what the young man said. Emptiness vouched for the resurrection itself. A fictional story was improved by this contrived plot, whereas reality would never have required it, because post-death appearances of a risen Jesus to real witnesses would have been quite sufficient. It wouldn't have mattered if there was still a corpse in the tomb, because Jesus had a new spiritual physical body anyway. 85 years ago, an English advertising salesman named Albert Ross wrote a book called Who Moved the Stone, under the pseudonym Frank Morrison. Ross was a devout Christian, troubled by the criticisms his faith was receiving from scientists and rationalists. So he wrote a response to them, which remains a classic of Christian apologetics and sets out many of the claims still heard today. Looking through the eyes of Ross, every absurdity of the Jesus story becomes indisputable evidence of its historical veracity. Ross is particularly fond of terms like irreducible certainty and ineradicable facts. And his assertions of certain truth pile up quickly, one on top of another. Ross was particularly interested in the empty tomb tradition. One of Ross's irreducible certainties was that there was no early Christian veneration of a tomb, an observation that may actually be correct. But to a rational mind, the lack of obvious Christian veneration towards a tomb is most reasonably explained by the simple truth that the whole Jesus story is a fiction, that there was no Jesus, no tomb, and at that time no Christians to either venerate or ignore it. To Ross and Christians, however, the evidence of no evidence strengthens their faith. It may seem absurd, in fact it is absurd, to make such a hullabaloo about an empty tomb, but the supposed hole in the ground that Christians ignored is absolutely crucial for the claims of a resurrection and the entire edifice of Christianity. If we return to the scene in Mark's Gospel at dawn on Easter Sunday, the women have had the foresight to prepare spices, but bizarrely they have given no thought to rolling the stone until they have arrived at the tomb. Since they had watched the burial only a day or so before, the women knew precisely what they were up against. So why hadn't they arranged for the help of other disciples, or at least other women? The answer, of course, is that the author of Mark knew what he would be writing, and he didn't require additional characters to move the stone. So his women had hardly voiced the question of who will move the stone when they find the stone moved. They are there, we are told, to anoint Jesus, but he had already been anointed for his burial only 2 days earlier at Bethany. The punchline, "He is risen," is delivered by an unknown young man in a white robe. It's all very contrived, and it isn't history, it isn't true, it's just more astounding rubbish from the New Testament.